George has been dealing with something the Clippers are calling bone edema for a number of months, and in a recent post-game interview, he had this to say.
Was it related to the bone edema thing from a couple weeks ago?
Yeah.
Okay.
Kind of flared up again.
Welcome back, everybody. I'm Dr. Brian Suter, and this is your number one source for learning about the unique medical side of the world of sports. So unfortunately, it appears this bone edema has flared back up, and so in this video, we'll take a look at this injury and kind of talk about what in the world is going on. As always, if you enjoyed learning about this unique side of sports, please consider subscribing and hit that thumbs up button if you learned something from this video. Let's get started. George was first diagnosed with this bone edema back in February, but in an interview said he was actually having some pain and symptoms much earlier. Edema means swelling, and so this injury involves some sort of swelling of the bone. Specifically, it's his second toe. And so we look at our biodigital anatomy tool here. The second toe is what I have highlighted. Now there are three toe bones, the proximal phalanx, the middle phalanx, and the distal phalanx. And so essentially it's going to be one of these three bones, probably this proximal phalanx that has swelling of the bone. What George and the Clippers seem to be describing here is likely something on the continuum of a bone stress injury. The progression of these bone stress injuries goes from a stress reaction to a stress fracture to ultimately a complete fracture. And these essentially develop because of an imbalance in the bone remodeling process. It's normal for our bones to respond to stress by basically breaking down bone and then building up new bone. In this normal, healthy remodeling phase, the bone resorption equals the bone formation, and everything's nice and good. But then for a variety of reasons, the bone breakdown can outpace the bone formation, which can lead to this cycle of bone stress injuries. The outer hard portion of bone is called cortical bone, and the inner portion is trabecular bone. When we have normal loading on our bones, we have microtrauma that's induced in these bones in response to that external stress. And our bones respond to that by remodeling to repair that microtrauma and build up healthy bone. When stress injuries develop, we get further progression of these microfractures within the trabecular inner part of the bone that can then develop into edema or swelling within the bone, and even swelling of the outer layer of the bone called the periosteum. And remember, this is all a continuum. So if you don't adequately address it, that stress reaction where there's no clear fracture develops into a stress fracture, and then further breakdown and injury causes the actual complete fracture of the bone. When we image these bones to evaluate them on MRI, we can see signs of edema or swelling within either the periosteum, that outer layer of the bone, or within the inner portion of the bone itself. And that's a big part of how we diagnose these stress injuries. The way we treat stress injuries is we rest, we offload so that we can allow that bone remodeling to reset to a normal level to hopefully reintroduce proper bone healing. We classify stress fractures as either high risk or low risk locations, and thankfully the second toe, like Paul George has, is a low risk stress injury. This means we don't have to be as aggressive in managing them, and they're not considered as severe. But the challenge that George and the Clippers are running into is that you can get into this cycle where you rest it, the pain goes away, but then as you ramp your activity back up, as you re-stress and load that bone, you jump back into this abnormal cycle where that bone breakdown outpaces the regrowth. The pain then comes back, and then you have to kind of restart this whole process all over again. George also had this to say about how the symptoms are affecting his play.
There's really no pop on the right foot because it's, I can't really bend my toe and have that flexion all the way on that second toe.
So he's having trouble basically pushing off that foot and flexing or pushing off of his toes because of the stress that puts through this toe and the pain that it causes him. The challenge for the medical staff is how do you give him adequate rest to hopefully allow this to completely heal so that it doesn't pop back up again during the postseason. The fact that it's returned already makes me more concerned that this could be a continuous process of feeling good one day, feeling bad the next, and be a challenge for the Clippers to manage the rest of the year. But that's it for the video, everybody. I hope this was educational to learn about these kind of phases of bone remodeling and everything with this spectrum and continuum of bone stress injuries. The goal here is that this doesn't progress to something where there's a fracture that then really does require more definitive management with a longer absence. Let me know, as always, any questions or comments down below, and until next time, we'll see you later.